Oh, Wildfire! This is another deck that was underrated and underused during the base set era. It played off of a win condition that most people forgot about because most people just took 6 prizes and that was game. But you can also lose if you deck out. And just by looking at the Wildfire attack on Fossil Moltres, you can pretty much get the point of this deck. The deck is very simple to use, but of course there are some very big weaknesses. So let's get into the basic structure of this deck and chat about it. Of course, you will be starting out with a full playset of Fossil Moltres. It's actually a pretty easy card to get a hold of. And so the main purpose of it is use that Wildfire attack. You will never be saving up energy for that Dive Bomb for this deck. Wildfire just helps chip away damage and mill down your opponent's deck. Chansey is in there as an alternative strategy for if you get them down to maybe they have like 10 cards left, you can just throw Chansey out there and use the basic sponge strategy to just let it take damage, heal it off. That way your opponent has to waste turns and they could waste up to 10 turns milling themselves. Magmar is in here because it's also a great stall card, that smokescreen attack. It deals a little bit of damage, which isn't the point. It's mainly keeping your opponent from dealing damage to you and for minimum energy because you're going to be putting those energy on Moltres for Wildfire. Scoop Up is in here for obvious reasons like on Chansey, or if Magmar is getting too much damage on it, it deprives your opponent of prize cards. So not letting them get kills, forcing them to take extra turns just to knock stuff out, like with Chansey's high HP. Pokemon Center does the exact same thing. They start racking up damage on that Chansey, and you just heal it off over and over again. Chansey's never going to need energy on it. Meanwhile, you can save up energy on that Moltres for a really big Wildfire attack that's going to discard a lot of cards. Item Finder is just so you can recycle all of these things. If you run out of Pokemon Centers, you can just use Item Finder, discard a couple of energy from your hand, get it back out of your discard. Same thing with energy retrieval. You don't want to run out of energy with this deck because you want to keep loading them. You want to do that free energy every turn. So energy retrieval helps get those fire energy back out of the discard. Energy removal is another stall tactic. If you're keeping energy off of your opponent's Pokemon, they're not going to be attacking you. They're having to waste turns. So if every time they put down an energy, you're discarding it with these energy removals or super energy removals, you're just stalling out the game, and that's pretty much what it is. You want your opponent to keep playing Bills and Professor Oaks, trying to get cards that they need, which is making them beat themselves. And it might seem like a dirty tactic, but stall has always been part of Pokemon, not only the video game series, but also the card game, and this kind of harkens back to Magic the Gathering, where you actually had a card called Millstone that just removed cards from your opponent's deck until they couldn't draw anymore, and then they would lose. Which is exactly what this deck does. I'm just going to round it out with a whole bunch of fire energy. You're going to need those because your opponent will be playing energy removal, super energy removal, trying to keep them off of that Moltres, trying to stall themselves out so that they can find a way to win, even with limited cards. Wildfire was never really a big archetype at the time. Nobody really expected to see it at tournaments, mainly because it's a deck that needed to take time and stall out in a format that was all about getting really fast knockouts, getting turn 2 setups, and so you could sometimes surprise people with it. If your opponent doesn't know that you're running a Wildfire build, if you just start out with a Magmar, they're going to try to set up, they're going to play Professor Oak's Bills out the ass, just trying to get their setup, and in doing so, they're going to mill half of their deck for you. Now, on the other hand, if they do know that you're running Wildfire, then you're going to have to play differently. You're going to have to start out with a Moltres and mill one card at a time. Just add an energy, use Wildfire, discard it, and rinse and repeat every turn. Otherwise, they're going to be targeting that Moltres. They're going to Gust of Wind it off your bench if you have a Chansey or something active, or they're just going to energy removal over and over just to save their own ass. Meanwhile, they're actually attacking and you're not able to because it's not really the point of the deck. And one of the things I do really like about this deck is that you don't have a bad start, really. If you start with a Chansey, then you've already got your stall wall put up. You can start loading a Moltres on the bench. If you start with a Magmar, you've got good stall there too. Magmar is a great Pokemon by itself. And then if you start with a Moltres, that means you can start milling turn 1. Even though if you start with a Moltres on the playing field, your opponent will probably know what's up and they'll be trying to strategize against it. But also early game, there's not much that your opponent can do to a Moltres. It doesn't have a weakness and it has a fighting resistance, which is actually pretty great for this format. Even though Moltres is a fire type, you don't really have to worry about water decks doing much against it because of the rain dance. It's going to take a couple of turns to set up, and by then you're able to mill a little bit. Wigglytuff can present a challenge because it can get set up turn 2 and deal that 70 damage to knock Moltres out. If you're really worried about keeping that Moltres alive, you could add in a place of Defender. It might slow down your deck a little bit, but again, that's not going to hurt it because if anything, you just stall out your opponent a little bit longer and they mill themselves to death. I don't think it's really needed because you're really squeezing the usefulness out of Pokemon Center. Chansey's not going to have any energy on it, so it's not going to be discarding anything. You're not losing anything. Moltres is going to discard every single energy you put on it. It's not losing anything. You get a free heal off of it. And Magmar at the most is going to lose 1 energy because that's all you really want to put on there. The main focus needs to be on Moltres. And do the wave variants can pose a really big threat to it. Wigglytuff can set up really fast. So if you really want to combat those, you need to focus early on energy removals and energy removals. If you can knock off those double colorless energy as soon as they get onto a Jigglypuff, then you can really stall out a Wigglytuff deck really fast. Those kinds of decks are also very reliant on using heavy draw power early in the game, like maybe getting off 3 Professor Oaks in the first couple of turns. And that's really gonna put your opponent in a hard spot because they have to decide, do they want to risk milling themselves through their deck to try to get a really great setup and try to knock out your Pokemon and take 6 prizes, or do they want to try to get in a waiting war with you to where they are playing 1 card a turn, they're not drawing more than they need. And another side of this deck is luck. If you get really lucky, then the cards that you're milling off of the top of their deck are the key cards your opponent needs to get set up. If you're playing this deck against, say, a Rain Dance, and you're able to mill out all of their Blastoise, it's going to be really hard for them to get it out. Most of those decks don't run any kind of Pokemon recovery, so once they're in the discard pile, they're staying there. Same thing for Wigglytuff. If you can get those Wigglytuffs or those double colorless energy in the discard early on, you've pretty much screwed that deck, and you're going to be able to stall out for as long as you want. I've now posted deck lists using all 3 of the legendary birds from Gen 1, so I feel accomplished now. If you guys like what I'm doing, make sure to like the videos and leave down in the comments decks you want to see in the future, maybe thoughts or comments about the decks that I post, and I'll see you guys next time. Wildfire!